Welcome to the Messenger-Inquirer Gridiron Report, sponsored by Crandall's Home Furnishings and Carpets Unlimited. I'm Scott Hagerman, and with me is Mark Mathis. And I tell you, Mark, it seems like we were just sitting here, season was getting ready to start, and 11 weeks later, and now all of a sudden we just wrapped up the regular season. It's amazing how quick this goes by.
Yeah, and it's always like that, too. You think it's going to take a long time, but then, yeah, by the time you really think about it, you're 8 or 9 games in, and then, oh, yeah, now it's time for the playoffs. So,
yeah. Well, we had some interesting games on the last week, and we want to go right to a clip of Owensboro High School going to Henderson, take on the Henderson County Colonels. This is a long-standing rivalry, dates back just decades and decades. Thought it would probably be a really good matchup, both teams coming in ranked, Henderson in 6A and Owensboro in 5A, and it turned out to be that kind of game. 17-14 Henderson win, but talk about what Owensboro had a chance to do there at the end.
I thought Owensboro played extremely well defensively in this game. Henderson moved the ball on them, but they kept things out of the end zone, and they gave themselves a chance to win by stopping a Henderson drive at the 5 and then coming back. And Graham Gilliam has a chance again as time expires to, kick a field goal that would have sent the game into overtime at least. He was just left. I mean, not by very much at all. So it was a very hotly contested ball game. Cleanly played, but both, like you're saying, these teams have played each other for years and years, either as Henderson City or Henderson County, and they have a very strong rival considering they're not in the same town, that kind of thing. But
boy, Graham Gilliam has really experienced the life of a kicker over the last 2 weeks. He kicks a field goal to beat Madisonville-North Hopkins, and then misses a field goal to potentially tie the game at Henderson. And as Joe Prince, I thought it was interesting what Joe Prince said to you after the game. Graham Gilliam shapes up. He's going to be the type kicker. He's going to win a lot of games for him as his career goes on. He's got a lot of potential.
Oh, I think that there are people in the OHS camp who would say that he may end up being a better kicker than his brother was, emerged for them late in his career, especially last year. And they're putting him in really clutch situations. And I'd say going 500, being a sophomore in game-winning situations like that, I don't think that can do anything but help him down the line.
Right. Owensboro hosts Grayson County next week in the first round of the 5A playoffs. We'll talk about this much more later in the week, but what's your initial impressions of that matchup?
I think that will be a very hard-hitting contest. I mean, Grayson County has shut out a lot of opponents, most opponents this season, and they're not doing that with smoke and mirrors. I mean, they must be very good defensively. And people have told me that they like to try to throw the ball, so that seems to be what they will come at Owensboro with. I think Owensboro has gotten, even though they've been in some tight games, they've gotten better defensively. They're able to play, I think, a little bit more with the pressure on them right now.
So I sense you think Owensboro has to step up more offensively than they do defensively.
There's no doubt about that. Jacob Roberts has been doing a pretty decent job managing the game, but they didn't have Ryan Bowling against Henderson County. He is supposed to be back against Grayson, and they have to have some semblance of a running game somewhere along the line.
Right. I mean, there's no question. That's what takes you somewhere in the postseason, unless you are a team whose offense is truly built around the pass. You're going to have to run the ball. I think they have that potential, though.
Oh, I think they do too. They have speed in the backfield, and then they've got a big kid back there who can kind of be their bulldozer, but they haven't been able to make it click consistently.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk much more about that game later in the week. Let's now go to a clip of Owensboro Catholic going into Reed Stadium to play the Daviess County Panthers. This was a really interesting game from the fact that these are two teams coming from just dramatically different angles. Catholic wins the game 38-16 to improve to 9-1. DC falls to 2-8. It ends their season. They did not qualify for the playoffs. I guess 38-16, probably not quite the margin we anticipated, but boy, it's hard to get a feel for this kind of game.
Right, and I think John Edge talked going in about, we're staying sharp, we're having good practices, that kind of deal. But then they step out on the field and they're like, we'll win this game, but how well do we have to execute, that kind of thing. I'm talking about the players, and I mean, I'm not saying that they're taking a game off or whatever, but concentration level probably wasn't there the way Edge wanted it to be with them going into the playoffs and with there's so much anticipation for how far they can go.
Well, I think it's a no-win game for Owensboro Catholic. Everybody comes into the game thinking, they should win by 40, 50 points. Catholic really not playing for anything. It wasn't like there was a city-county title on the line or anything.
Right.
They know they're the number 1 seed. And D.C. has everything to play for.
Yeah.
I mean, this is their Super Bowl. If their seniors are going to make a statement, this is the last chance they have to make a statement. So it was no lose for Owensboro Catholic. And I give D.C. credit. D.C. could have laid down. You think the seniors are going to want to come in and make a statement, and I think they did.
Yeah.
38-16 is not an embarrassment to an Owensboro Catholic team.
No, and I think Daviess County had some moments this year where, they could have folded their tent a couple of times, and I think that, they held it together. Execution-wise, they were off in several areas throughout the season, but I don't think they really quit ever.
No, I definitely wouldn't say they ever quit. Let's talk about where these teams are going now. Catholic hosts Reedland in the first round of the 2A playoffs next week at Steele Stadium, and like we said, this was it for Daviess County this season. We'll talk much more about Catholic later in the week. Let's talk about where D.C. is. We expected them to be down last season, coming off of a really nice 2008 campaign.
Right.
But I think everybody anticipated this was going to be a little bit more of a move back up.
Right.
And it just didn't pan out. And it just looked like they could never really figure out that offense at all.
No. Even after they moved Darius Cried, he had some early success, after they moved him to quarterback. They had some early success, but they're another team that never could really get a handle on running the football. So your quarterback's exposed totally. I think they had decent line play, but they kept having to shuffle personnel.
Right.
So that probably says, okay, we had some guys who weren't really sure what was going on, that kind of thing, or people might be able to execute better in a different position or whatnot.
It's going to be really interesting to see how the Panthers bounce back next year. We expect these peaks and valleys from small schools. That's just a constant process at 95% of them. But at a 6A school, if you go on a decline, it seems like that decline can really start going down. They need a bounce back year next year.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, they need to find some more personnel in certain areas, and if they could do that, I think they would. It's like you're talking about, have a little bounce back or whatever. There is talent in that school. I think getting it to the practice field is probably something of a challenge.
Let's talk about one other game before we go to break, and that was Apollo going to Madisonville to play Madisonville-North Hopkins. Ends up being Madisonville-North Hopkins 45-14. Apollo did have some players out with injuries.
Right.
But I still, Apollo makes the playoffs. They're going to Louisville Mail next week. But they're 2-8. This Apollo team, much like D.C., just never got any feel for this Apollo team at all this year.
No, and I mean, I think that I'm sure they feel like they underachieved because Paul Bates acted like he had a really good feeling about what this team could do, especially offensively. I think they expected Elijah Dillard maybe to be able to carry him a little bit more, and they never were really able to establish a running game either. And again, a lot of personnel changing on the offensive lines. I think both Daviess County and Apollo played, relatively speaking, winning football defensively.
Yes.
They both had problems, I think, up front offensively.
Right. Well, we'll see. We'll talk more about Apollo Mail later in the week. Well, we're going to take a break, and we've got 3 more games to talk about when we come back.